Hey, this is Mike from the Run Testers, and in this video we're going to be talking about this. This is the Amazfit T Rex 2. Now I will first get into what the Amazfit T Rex 2 is exactly, then we'll get into our run test. That'll be myself and Nick, and we'll give you our verdict on whether you should buy the Amazfit T Rex 2 to track your runs. So before we get into how the Amazfit T Rex 2 performs as a running watch, let's talk a little bit about what exactly the T Rex 2 is. Now, it's sad to say it has nothing to do with dinosaurs whatsoever. There's not even a dinosaur themed watch face on here, but what it essentially is giving you is an outdoor watch, a multi-sports GPS watch that can track runs, but it also tracks your cycling, swimming, other kind of outdoor activities as well. And unlike the first two Amazfit T Rex watches, the T Rex and T Rex Pro, which I have tested, it's less about just giving you something that's rugged and tough and fit for the outdoors. It now has mapping and navigation support, which those previous watches didn't have. So you have the ability to upload routes. On top of that, you are now getting a dual band mode in terms of the improving the outdoor tracking accuracy. So this is something we've seen on Coros watches and on Huawei watches as well. And it's for when those times where the signal can be a bit tricky to kind of pick up when you're kind of running near tall buildings, kind of in kind of tall wooded areas as well. So you've got that on the Amazfit 2. In terms of battery life, you're looking at weeks as opposed to days here. There are kind of a variety of GPS accuracy modes. You can improve the battery life when you kind of sacrifice or compromise a little bit in terms of the overall GPS accuracy, but you can push things a little bit further in that tracking mode. It is a smartwatch that performs like a smartwatch. It works with Android and iOS. You do get some app support here. We'll get into a bit more what that means essentially on the T Rex 2. But you're getting things like notifications, you're getting weather forecast, those kind of things that you kind of expect from a smartwatch. So it's an outdoor watch, a sports tracking watch, a smartwatch. You're getting kind of fitness tracking in there as well. So it offers a lot. Price-wise, it is cheaper than the Garmin Fenix significantly, the Polar Grit X Pro, the Coros Vertix 2. I think even it's cheaper than the Garmin Instinct as well. So potentially this is an affordable outdoor watch with some very strong run tracking features that might make it worth looking at.
So I found the design of the T Rex very light and comfortable to wear all the time. The look's not exactly to my taste, with a kind of rugged exterior combined with a bright screen. I really don't like the kind of metal clip bit that says Amazfit on it, but it was a very comfortable watch to wear for long periods. I had no issues with that at all. The screen is a bit of a mixed bag, but it's not the best AMOLED screen I've come across in terms of how bright and easy it is to see on the run, I found. And with the always on screen on, the kind of always on version of your stats on the run, that's too dim to see, I found. So you do have to turn the wrist, wait a beat for the kind of screen to properly wake up, and then you can see your stats on the run. So it's a real quality of life thing, I think, that being able to just do that and see your stats and carry on is what is such an important part of sports watches, and it doesn't quite nail it, the T-Rex. I found it took a second each time, which if you're an easy runner, doesn't matter, you're not really looking at your watch very much, but if you're pacing a run, hard run, you want to be able to look at your stats quickly, move down. I think, the screen wasn't quite amazing on that front. I've seen AMOLED screens that are much better, like the Garmin Epix one, or Huawei's actually AMOLED screens have a much better always-on version than I saw with the T-Rex. But in general, it's a good design. I like, it's a nice, comfortable watch. Just a bit of a problem in bright sunlight at times.
So in terms of that design, fit, and what this watch is like to live with, I would say, having tested the Amazfit T Rex and the T Rex Pro, they feel very similar. This feels very similar to those two watches. It's very much I am an outdoor watch. It's big, bulky, though it's made from plastic, and it's reasonably light without feeling a little bit kind of cheap and light. Ultimately, you're getting similar in terms of the strap. It's not that easy to remove ultimately, like some of the Amazfit watches that you can get and offer kind of removable straps. Yeah, I'm not a massive fan of the kind of outdoor kind of watch look, but it's been fine for me generally overall. I normally use a Garmin Epix, which obviously is a different kind of end of the price scale, has kind of different materials, higher grade materials at use there, and that feels a little bit sleeker. But in terms of being a watch to wear, it's fine. It's a nice looking outdoor watch. It's a good weight, I think. Screen wise, you've got a lovely display on here. It's a colour AMOLED touchscreen display. It's the same size as the one on the T Rex Pro, but it's a higher resolution one this time. Now, for me, I didn't think the screens were that bad on the first two T Rex watches, but ultimately you're still getting something that's bright, colourful. I think, you know, it's responsive to touch. You know, there's no kind of real lag in terms of swiping through the screens. Visibility for me was pretty good outdoors in bright kind of outdoor light, where AMOLED touchscreen displays can typically kind of suffer and struggle. For me, it's been absolutely fine. You can use it in always on mode as well. That will understandably, you know, drain the battery a lot quicker as well. You do have the raise to wake gesture, which I found nicely responsive, particularly when I was out running as well. So from that point of view, it's an outdoor watch. It's kind of been, I think it's got 12, 15 military grade certifications in terms of toughness and durability. It works kind of extreme hot and cold temperatures, is dust resistant, is waterproof, so you can swim with it as well, pool and open water. So from that point of view, if you're looking for a kind of rugged, tough watch, you know, a watch that doesn't feel cheap and plastic, even though that's predominantly the materials that are in play here, and you've got a good, sharp, colourful, vibrant touchscreen display, that's what you get on the T Rex 2.
The T Rex 2 was a really pleasant surprise for me in terms of how good it was on the run. It's a nice array of stats you get there. It's not as comprehensive as a sports watch, but you can customize the data screens. There's loads of stats there. There's an intervals workout mode on the watch itself. And then the accuracy was also very good. So it's got dual band GPS. Now, dual band GPS comes out on lots of watches lately, and I find that tends to be a bit of disparity in what that actually means. Like with Garmin's top watches, like the Epix 2 and the 40955, the dual band GPS is a noticeable step up for me, even in tricky GPS conditions. But with Huawei's watches with dual band GPS, I've not really seen any major improvement on that compared to standard GPS. So I was worried the Amazfit would be more like the Huawei, but actually it's more like the Garmin's. Like it was a really good, accurate GPS tracker. I've got a few tricky GPS areas around me, like, you know, I run in the forest a lot with lots of tree cover. I do a lot of quite tight loops on the road when I'm doing workouts on the road, and there's one of them in particular that's a very clear GPS dead spot for lots of watches. But the T Rex 2 tracked very well against the Garmin Epix throughout my runs. Oddly, sometimes on the run I get a weird lap split, even when I looked at the data afterwards, and the GPS track was very good and the actual pace looked very accurate. But yeah, so sometimes there's little bugs like that maybe, but in general, very impressive GPS accuracy, and that's actually the same for the heart rate accuracy. It's annoying that you can't connect up an external heart rate monitor. That would be very useful, I think, for a watch that's aspirations of being a good sports watch. But the heart rate accuracy was actually very good. Like in some runs, it would have a bit of a problem at the start of a run looking onto my heart rate, but generally after that, it would key in on it and follow the correct heart rate as measured by a chest strap through kind of interval sessions or progression runs very well. So on those fronts, accuracy and kind of what the stats are available, I think there's not too much to fault about the T Rex 2. Like I say, the screen's not amazing for running sometimes, but otherwise it performs very well as a sports watch. The training analysis, I think, lets it down a little bit. It's kind of got all the key things there, but none of it really added up kind of with logic or kind of what other watches were telling me at the time. Like at one point while I was wearing it, I did workout days back to back, like 2 hard workouts in a row, as part of like a mini training block, and the next day it was saying, oh, fully recovered, ready to go again, and just clearly wasn't. The Garmin would have me at like 40 hours, 50 hours of recovery, that kind of thing. So yeah, training analysis wasn't great, but overall the actual basic sports tracking was very good, and the accuracy was really impressive. I wasn't able to test the navigation kind of route import on the watch because I had to send my sample back before that launched, but I did. You can see a blue line of where you've run during any run, and you can get a back to start pointer up, so that's that's pretty good. And if you're adding route import with kind of directions as well, that's very impressive at this price point. So yeah, that's another strong suit of their T Rex.
So in terms of that run test, it has been pretty good for me overall, I would say, with the T Rex 2. I'll start with kind of GPS performance, and you're getting kind of the support for the kind of key satellite systems here, but crucially you're getting that dual band mode that we have seen crop up on other watches. Now, in terms of that dual band mode on other watches, I found it okay. So things on the Huawei, so there's similar support on the Huawei Watch GT Runner, also on the Coros Vertix 2. And I found dual band mode, which essentially, is improving the way, or, you can pick up that signal from a satellite, and, where it's typically very tricky to do so. Now, for me, in terms of my testing, I use this against the 40955. I found the dual band mode on this probably the most reliable in comparison to the dual band watches I've tested. It held up pretty well in distance tracking. It wasn't always 100% perfect, but I feel like it was good enough for me, noticeably. And those kind of core metrics that came with it in terms of pace, in terms of splits and things like that, they kind of pretty much matched up with what I got on the 955. And I felt happy with the accuracy from that point of view. And in terms of heart rate tracking, you know, you've got an optical sensor there, which I think is good for steady pace runs and slow runs. When you up the intensity, it starts to struggle. It's not the worst performer. I was using it against a MyZone heart rate monitor chest strap, and I found for the steady runs, it was absolutely fine in terms of the average and max readings in general. When you up that intensity, you start to see it falter a little bit more and start to struggle to keep up with those peaks and troughs in, you know, when you see in kind of interval training. But it's definitely not the worst performer I've seen at kind of high intensity. Ultimately, though, you don't have the capability to pair an external sensor to improve those things, which is a shame, really. A couple of things that I kind of pick out in terms of running and software features that you're getting here. You do have an interval training mode, which you can access from the sub menu before you start tracking, which I think is nice to see, and we're starting to see added in kind of non-sports watches, from Huawei and other watches as well. I would say you also get, on top of the interval training, you're getting the ability to create plans, which you can create in the Companion Zep app, and you can sync those over to the watch. So you have that on top of that interval training, you can create other kind of training modes here as well, which is kind of a nice touch, and it's only been added recently in the latest software update. So in terms of training kind of accuracy and tracking accuracy and the kind of training features that are at your disposal, I think are pretty solid overall. There is another feature you're getting in terms of delving into kind of training analysis. So that's called Peak Beats, and it's kind of a riff off Garmin's kind of first beat training analysis features. So essentially you're looking at things like training load, suggested recovery time, VO2 max estimates as well. Now, I was using it against a 9.4 and a 955, and what I found for things like training load scores and suggested recovery time, it was pretty similar to what the 955 suggested for me on most of my runs. So from that point of view, I found it pretty reliable, and also, you know, just offering a bit of guidance in terms of when to kind of ease off in training, whether you're at your optimal kind of training load. Essentially, from the VO2 max scores, there's definitely a big difference on that front. I was obviously using the Garmin with a paired to a heart rate monitor chest strap, so it's pulling that VO2 max from a more reliable heart rate sensor, where the VO2 max scores are coming from the heart rate sensor built into the watch, which I found not fantastic or perfect for running. So I think the Peak Beat stuff potentially can offer a nice bit of guidance for people. It's not perfect, and I always say don't, you know, live by it, but I think in terms of what I saw in terms of the data that it kind of pulled out for me, I think it was generally pretty reliable. So in terms of my running performance, I found it pretty solid overall. I think the dual band mode here was pretty solid and reliable. I found the heart rate monitoring generally okay for steady and easy pace runs. And then the training analysis side of things and the interval training and training plans that you can add on top in terms of that experience were pretty good as well, and probably better than some of the other watches that have had a go at kind of offering those features and kind of outside of the sports watches essentially. So yeah, all very positive for me basically in terms of my run test. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the video, one of the big features here on the T Rex 2 is the fact that you're now getting some level of mapping and navigation support, which you didn't get at all on the T Rex and the T Rex Pro. Now, it isn't at the level of something like a Fenix or a top-end Fenix or an Epix, but it is still pretty good in terms of what you expect at this price. You can upload routes and follow those on the watch. Now, that does support multiple file formats, and that does support the main kind of most popular GPX file format. So you can create those routes or upload those routes in the companion phone app. You can also use existing kind of track sessions and use those as your kind of routes to kind of sync over to the watch as well. You can also, now in terms of navigation, you are getting kind of back to the start, you're getting kind of simple breadcrumb, kind of real-time navigation. So you get a simple line that you're kind of following. You're not getting kind of any buzzes or vibrations in terms of kind of, you know, if you go off course, getting you in the kind of back on the right route essentially. Now this wasn't initially available in our early testing, so that's why Nick won't be talking too much about this. So I've had this watch a little bit longer. The update has rolled out now. I've been able to update my T Rex 2 and those features are now available. Now, as I said, you're not getting the level of mapping and navigation support that you do get on those top end kind of Garmin watches. But what you are getting, I think, is something that works reasonably well. You know, I've used the kind of navigation support. I've been able to sync routes over reasonably easy. You can kind of access the navigation features in the kind of sub menu before you start tracking your runs. As I said, it's pretty basic in terms of following kind of, you know, an arrow and knowing where to go. But, you know, other watches like the Polar Grit X Pro, I think a lot of Sinto watches, some other Garmin watches as well, which are around this price range, offer similar kind of support. So from that point of view, it's great to see that it's got that mapping and navigation support, which should have really been at some level on the original T Rex or maybe the T Rex Pro as well. So it's great to have those features here. I'm glad it's finally kind of rolled out. That software update has now rolled out to this watch to offer that capability. And for the price, when you consider, you know, not a lot of watches, you know, below this price point offer those features, it's very few. It did pretty well for me in terms of how well it is to get those routes on there, to follow those routes, even if you're not getting this rich kind of detail mapping that you will get if you spend a lot more money on a Garmin Fenix or an Epix. But yeah. So I'm going to delve into the Amazfit T Rex T from a smartwatch point of view, because that might be a reason that some people might be thinking, is this a watch that I want to go for? I kind of want that smartwatch experience. Is it going to be good enough for me and serve me well from that point of view? Now, for me, I was using this predominantly with an Android phone. I found the experience very good. I think the smartwatch experience in general on Amazfit watches are getting a lot better overall. I think from a on-watch software point of view, it's all very easy to get to grips with. It's kind of similar, very, you know, kind of gesture-based kind of interactions that you're doing with this watch. It's easy to kind of get to grips with what it can do. I think the companion app is getting better. You don't have that level of kind of third-party app support, though it does work with Strava, so if that's something you care about, you do have that capability here. And yeah, you're getting enough there to kind of, you know, be able to tweak your settings to a good level, I would say. And while it's a little bit busy, I do think it's going in the right direction. Now, you're getting things like notifications, which I think look fine on the watch. The music controls are good. You don't have a built-in music player. You don't have payments. You don't have, you know, something like a Connect IQ store like you have on Garmin, but you do have an app store. It's very small at the moment. I think what Amazfit is doing with that app store front is trying to create something that offers apps that make sense on their watches. So from a T Rex 2 point of view, you have a GoPro controller, so it's thinking if you're a, you know, you like being outdoors, you know, you probably have an action cam, you might have a GoPro, so this gives you the capability to control it from your watch. There's a few other apps that I've downloaded that kind of improves or tries to improve kind of notification support, kind of using or following maps, navigation from kind of Google Maps as well. It's a bit clunky to kind of set those apps initially. You have to kind of go through some other apps before you can get set up. But, you know, it needs to be refined a bit more from that point of view. But for me, and an Android point of view, and somewhere where I can just check my notifications, I can control my music playing on my phone. I think the weather forecasts are quite nice as well. It kind of breaks things down in terms of, oh, it's, you know, it's really sunny, this is a good day to maybe kind of wash your car if you have a car. I mean, I quite like how they kind of communicate some of the kind of weather elements into it as well. There's a lot here. I think, from smartwatch features. It's not the most complete smartwatch experience, as I said, but I think it's enough. It's enough there. And there's signs that it is improving. So if you are a bit hesitant, I think particularly if you're an Android user, I think there's a good smartwatch experience here for you. It's good enough. I think it's going to be good enough for most people. It's not going to be the most complete or the richest that you'll find, but I think for most people, it's going to be absolutely fine. So.
I was a pretty heavy user of the T Rex 2 during my fairly limited time with it, so I had the always screen on the entire time, and I turned the GPS mode onto accuracy mode, which engages the dual band GPS the whole time for every run and kind of cycle I did with it. So for me, it lasted 8 days on a single charge, and that was including a run of every day, more or less, so about 8 hours of running, some cycling, some yoga, that kind of thing. So 8 days I think is pretty good. Like, it lists it a bit longer than that, but yeah, I think I was an exceptionally heavy user of it, and I have no reason to think that it wouldn't last a lot longer than that if you're a bit more sparing. But even so, 8 days is very good. Like, I'd probably get 4 or 5 out of the Garmin Epix 2, you know, which has a nice bright screen and has dual band tracking. So battery is definitely a strong point for the T Rex 2 as well.
So in terms of battery life, it's definitely weeks as opposed to days. Now, Amazfit's watches in general, including the T Rex, you know, the older T Rex watches, have offered strong battery life. Now, what I will say, and what I've noticed in my testing with the Amazfit watches, is they will express that battery life in kind of smartwatch mode. but you also have a heavy usage mode. Now, when you talk about the heavy usage mode, you're basically looking at when you're having that screen always on, when you are continuously monitoring heart rate at the most accurate kind of tracking option, if you're continuously tracking stress, having the advanced sleep tracking, tracking blood oxygen as well. So if all those things are in play, it is going to noticeably hit the battery life, and it will notify you that when you turn those features on. Now, with your T Rex 2, you're looking at what Amazfit says around 24 days kind of standard mode, 10 days heavy usage mode. Now, when you're using GPS, you have 3 different modes that you can kind of select from. So you have a high GPS accuracy mode, you have a single band mode, and then you have a kind of low power GPS mode as well. So obviously you sacrifice GPS accuracy to have that longer battery life. Now, in that top end kind of high GPS accuracy mode, Amazfit says you should get around 25-26 hours. Now, in terms of my tracking time, I was using it in that kind of high GPS tracking mode most of the time. From an hour's run, I saw a drop off of around 5%. Now, that would actually work out to probably about 20 hours. So not quite the 26 hours that kind of Amazfit promises. And also you've got to factor in all the other features that you may be using at the same time. But I think that's pretty good. That's not too bad. You know, it is obviously far off that claim, but 20 hours I think is not too bad. And obviously if you drop down to those GPS modes, you can get longer out of this watch. But I think in terms of the price you're paying, the GPS performance compared to watches around this, around the Amazfit T Rex 2, that's actually not too bad. You do have a kind of more basic power saver mode that will get you getting, you know, through a lot longer, maybe weeks. I was getting somewhere between the 10 days and 24 days that Amazfit kind of quotes here, and that's with kind of regular tracking and using smartwatch features. When I turned on those kind of more intense features, it would be closer to that 10 days, obviously. But you're definitely getting a solid week. You can definitely get longer based on my testing. You can potentially get those 24 days, but you've got to be a bit more selective about those features that you use.
So I found very little to fault with the Amazfit T Rex 2 during my time testing it. I thought it was a really good sports tracker with, you know, a nice AMOLED screen, maybe not the best AMOLED screen I've ever come across, but, you know, a really pretty good one. And, you know, that's a nice thing to have on a watch like this. If you're someone who doesn't want the slightly duller transselective displays that are common on sports watches, even if they maybe are a bit easier to read in bright sunlight. It's a nice alternative to some of the cheaper Garmins like the Instinct 2 and that kind of thing, although I do think Garmin's software and user interface is a lot better, and they are still ahead on sports tracking, but the T Rex really does do the basics very well indeed. And I prefer it to Huawei's range of kind of sports-focused smartwatches like the GT3 and the GT Runner, and, you know, I just mainly because of accuracy. That Huawei's got much better training analysis, and some of them have better features that you don't get on the T Rex, like being able to, you know, pair up a external chest strap sensor. But actually, in terms of the basics of run tracking and accuracy and customizable data fields, I think the T Rex is better and was more enjoyable to use for me. I don't think it surpasses the experience of a full sports watch, especially with those from Garmin in the price range, but I think it's a very nice alternative to have to the usual suspects if you do want a watch that looks like this with a screen like that, and, you know, but still really do want good, accurate run tracking, then the T Rex 2 is something to look at, and it is a really good price.
So my verdict on the Amazfit T Rex 2 as a running watch is that it is a much better running watch than the first Amazfit and the Amazfit T Rex Pro. And that's just because you now have that mapping and navigation support. If you're the kind of person who needs those features or like to have those features, you now have that here. You've also got that added bonus of that dual band mode as well when you're outdoor and tracking your runs as well. I found it very good overall. Probably, as I said earlier, probably the most reliable dual band mode I've used on a watch so far. I think as a smartwatch as well, I was pretty happy in terms of what it got. It's not the most complete smartwatch experience. Garmin probably gives you more of that. It's probably better or probably on par with what you're getting from kind of Polar. I think it's better than what you're getting on a Coros watch as well. And I think that platform, or the Zepp OS that it's based on, is improving, I think, in the right way. And then you've got that battery life, which I think, you know, when you consider that you have those extra kind of GPS modes that you can select from, even in the higher GPS accuracy mode, the battery life I think is pretty strong when you consider the price that you're paying for this watch. So I think if you had the Amazfit T Rex, the T Rex Pro, and you're like, should I get the T Rex 2? Is it a better watch? Yes, it is, and it's a better running watch. If I think about how this compares to other outdoor watches that can work as running watches, It is significantly cheaper than a Fenix, significantly cheaper than a Polar Grit X Pro, cheaper than the Garmin Instinct, cheaper than the Coros Vertix 2 as well. And if you think about what else is around here at this price in terms of outdoor watches, I think it stands out for all the right reasons. I think in terms of what you're getting, in terms of features, in terms of performance. And I have no hesitation in terms of recommending it at that price. And so if you don't want to spend a lot on a Garmin, a Polar, or a Coros, you can kind of live without that ability to kind of pair external sensors. Having that kind of richer kind of third-party app support. It does work with Strava, but ultimately if you want something that's kind of bigger in terms of that third-party support, those other watches are going to give you that. But in terms of that tracking, in terms of the hardware, in terms of the battery life, there's plenty to like here about the Amazfit T Rex 2. It's probably the best performing running watch I've used from Amazfit in a long time. Probably, you know, the Amazfit Bip, one of the early Amazfit Bips, are probably the most positive experiences I've had from a running perspective. This is definitely an upgrade in a lot of ways from that. I've had a very positive experience overall. And while it's not perfect and it's still improving as a smartwatch, there's definitely more to like here than to not. So there you have it. That is our take on the Amazfit T Rex 2. Now, if you've got any questions about this watch or our testing, let us know in the comments. As always, like and subscribe, hit that little bell to find out about our latest videos. And yeah, we'll see you for the next Run Testers video.